And then we're going to look at 2 examples and work through those for the last hour of class. Okay. Zoom them as big as I can. So protagonist and antagonist, y'all ready? Make sure you're making the fuel notes. Think of examples from the books that you like, stories. And that term will work for your favorite series, TV series, movie series, whatever. There's going to be a protagonist and antagonist. The more common, less literary definition might be a hero versus the villain. Okay. But it's just not always that extreme where, ta-da, the hero, and ta-da, the monster. Like in Beowulf, there's definitely the hero, which is Beowulf, and the villain is the monster Grendel, right? Very easy to identify there. But life isn't always like that. So literature is going to be a little bit more lifelike in that you're going to have a focus in the story. And in your story, the focus is you. You're the protagonist of your real life story, right? You. But in a series or in a short story, there's going to be a focus. It's real easy to see in a short story because it's very simplified, and there's going to be typically one easy to identify protagonist. Some are a little trickier than others. It's the main character, okay? And we typically think of this in prose because in drama, novels, and whatever, even though you can have a storyline, a narrative in poetry, typically it's more topical and not a story, okay? But if you have a narrative, any kind of story, you can have a main character. Then you have somebody who gets in the way. and that can even be a good person. That can be a non-person. It can be getting a flat tire on your way to school or your way to work. It can be not a non-person, but typically we think of it as a character who gets in our way, who stands in our way, and usually feel that that's pretty unjust, right? That wasn't someone who is standing between us and disaster and is trying to help us out. Usually in literature, but not always, it could be a really good person who's opposing the protagonist with a good intention in their heart, right? But it's whoever opposes the chief character for whatever reason, and that creates the conflict. So you have to have both, and stories like life, right, have conflicts. Okay, have ups and downs. They have struggles. That's the essence of our existence. All right, y'all got that one? That one's pretty easy. And I didn't organize this. This is out of our text, but so these, I wish they were a little bit more grouped toward genres. But meter we just looked at. I literally just showed you a little bit of meter. That's not on the end. That's that rhythm in there, like. Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? That one, it's like it's syllables and stresses. We don't say, shall I compare thee to a summer's day, right? That's even weirder. We would never say that without trying. Just right, just shall I compare thee to a summer's day? This is how that naturally flows. And that's meter. That's the way it's very intentionally written. Okay, we know that we have author is the person who wrote the poem. I would say actually that's what we call poet. And there's writing and then there's authoring. That's a whole other thing. But we do call the person who wrote the poem a poet is the author, as opposed to a persona or speaker. So there is a difference between the speaker of the poem. Okay, you can write in somebody else's voice, just like a narrator can be a character. Did anybody ever, oh man, going blank on Great Gatsby. Anybody read The Great Gatsby? Great novel, by the way. Yeah, okay, so y'all remember the name of the narrator? He was a character in the story. Oh, what was his name? Because you've got Gatsby, Jay Gatsby, who's the main character, and then you have this sort of guest that kind of lives there in a little guest house or something. Anybody remember the name of him? Because he's in the background, so it's easy to kind of forget his name. Daisy is the love interest, and then Daisy's husband, of course, Tom, would be a definitely antagonist, right? Nick, thank you, Maya. Yes, Nick, there we go. And he has his own little plot line, little love interest there, but it's all, about Gatsby. And Gatsby's, Nick is not the antagonist, he's a narrator. But, you know, he didn't write it. Like F. Scott Fitzgerald is the writer, right? The author of the story. He's not Nick. So in a poem, your poet can write from the perspective of a character or a person, take on a persona, and that is not necessarily the poet. So that's one of the things you have to distinguish is who's speaking here, who's telling the story. And when we look at the story that we're going to look at today, the short story Snow, we have to stop and think about that. That will help us understand the meaning. What kind of person is it? Why did the poet or the writer choose that? Y'all, everything that's fiction is a decision. Everything that made intentionally by the writer, the author. Whether that so part of the analysis is identifying that, recognizing what they put there and how it fits into some of these terms, because they know these. This is their craft. Okay, just like painters use paint and different kinds of paint because they're not all the same. Sculptors may choose iron, or they may choose bronze, or they may choose marble. Right? They know the tools. Words are their tools. And so you ask why? Why does it make sense to make Nick the character? And he kind of is the last one left standing, and it kind of takes a while to figure out who the narrator is in Moby Dick, but he's the only survivor, so it has to be him to tell the story. Why is it that person? Is it someone we can identify as a character, or is it sort of in the background? What do they know? What do they not know? And this kind of helps us understand those layers of meaning. All right, so we got meter, author, stanza, a group of lines that go together. Okay, so a sonnet it's just that one stanza. It's 14 lines. It's not split up. But if you think about stanzas of a song, we're back to our term list here, number 5. It could be 4 lines in a space and 4 lines. It's kind of like a paragraph, the equivalent of a paragraph for prose in their group. Now, the trick I was trying to allude to, or I didn't have time to really teach you, is that you can kind of break down a sonnet into groups of lines that go together. And so a stanza there's going to be space, but this little quatrain still kind of acts like a stanza. This little group goes together, this little group goes together. All right, imagery, that's a structural, but it also helps us with meaning. Imagery is an important term. We use this, doesn't matter, it's very broad. Prose, poetry, all of it, imagery. And it's words that paint a picture in the mind of the reader. Now, that is visual. That's a description that's only visual, but imagery can be anything that appeals to your senses. You have some experience that you can recall, what that tastes like, what that smells like, what that would feel like, what it would sound like when they use the words, sometimes like clash, bang, pop. You almost can hear it when you hear the word because it sounds like it. But when you talk about, stroking, running your fingers and it's stroking the silky smoothness of the fur, depending on what the fur is, you have some kind of experience, sensory, your brain has a memory of that connects to. Okay. So it's the human experience being described in ways, in words, that connects with the words, the language you've learned to associate with that experience. Okay. So that's one way we connect. And it's language that tries to recall those sensory experiences. So they're really key. They were trying to make a connection to you there. All right. Any questions so far? We're going to move along here. I'm going to group 7 and 9 and come back to 8. Metaphor and simile, because they're very similar. Okay, so 7 and 8. Metaphor, they're both comparisons, by the way. Both comparisons. And we like comparisons. We use them a lot in teaching. I can't remember from introductions if there was anybody in this class that. But listen, in your job, if you're going to get beyond just the technical, you're going to be a bit of a teacher. When you talk to patients, you're going to use metaphors and similes. You're going to say, well, is it like this? I remember taking my kids to the pediatrician. They have this little symbols, for how much was the pain level. Because everybody say it hurts really bad. Well, how bad? Well, does it hurt like this? You have the where, but you're trying to figure out the how. What does it feel like? Well, it feels like, is it like pounding pressure right here? Does it feel like it's in a vice? Thinking about my headache. Oh my God, it feels like an explosion. Parts of it felt like someone squeezing my temple. We use metaphors and similes to describe things that we have no other way to describe, right? It's how we relate new experiences to old ones. It's very important in our everyday language, and it's a type of figurative language. It's not actually happening. There's not a literal vice tool on my head. It just feels like that. When I say my head is exploding, is it literally? No, it just feels like, right? I'm burning up here. I'm just using the medical stuff and my recent, am I literally burning? No, but I just feel I'm so hot. So those are figurative language. Metaphors, when you just say it is, love is a rose or something. But when you use like or as, then it goes to when it has that characteristic, it's called a simile. Love is like a rose. Okay, just to be real simplistic here. So they're both figurative comparison words, and we use that kind of stuff a lot to try to explain our existence, explain our feelings, explain our experiences to others who have not or had walked in our shoes. It's a way of relating. Oh, I know what that feels like. When you say my head is exploding, oh, I know that feeling, right? Or if it feels pounding or pressure caving in. When you can verbalize it that way, others can go, I know what that feels like. Okay, I understand that. Right? So everybody got that? The difference between metaphor and simile, they're both comparisons. It's helped to get those layers of meaning across there. But the simile uses like or as, and they have the river examples here. Okay, life is a river, or life is like a river. So it's not literal. Life is not literally a rose, or love is not literally a rose. We use that. We got Valentine's coming up here in a little over 10 days. Roses, that gets to become symbolic when we start having this shared meaning, where we don't have to say love is like a rose or love is a rose. When it already has that meaning attached to it, then it becomes a symbol. Okay, so that is a symbol. We're going to talk more about that the next class, because it's a really big part of literature and the human experience, is when a thing, it can be a person, a place, already has an attached figurative meaning that is usually already known to others. Okay. So I don't have to say, we don't have one for a headache. I don't think I can think of right on the top. So we have to say, because all these headaches are different. But for love, it's like, okay, think about this, guys, gals. Different roses colors mean different things too, right? I mean, that is what we call a cultural symbol, because it's very American. A red rose, symbolic or signifies or means, those are the interchangeable means, right? Like romance, love, right? What about pink? What about pink rose? You'll see some of the bouquets will have red, and they'll pink, and the white, and they'll be all still. Anybody know what the pink love is? Pink rose kind of love? Yes. It could be friendship. And then you have white roses, which are more of a sign of purity, pure love. You have all these attached meanings. And yes, can you say I'll make it mean whatever I want to? Of course you can, but is anybody going to understand it, right? It's a cultural thing when we use, it's a type of language when we take these symbols and we have a common association with it. You're not going to get the wrong message, I should say. I mean, if you send somebody a dozen red roses, you mean something. And I mean, obviously it has to match up with the rest of that person's behavior. It's not a substitute for the real thing, right? You can't treat them ugly all the rest of the year and then give them red roses, because that just doesn't work, right? It's just a symbol, but that's what it's supposed to signify there, right? So we do that. We have that culturally. Universal ones are ones that are outside just your culture and your time. I don't know how far back red roses go back, but they're not considered universal. Like, they didn't give red roses in ancient Egypt, for example. They probably didn't even have roses there. You have to have access to them. And somewhere along the line, that's what happened. It probably was a florist's idea. Who knows? But we bought in, and we do it at Valentine's. Okay, so that's how a symbol is unique from the two. Figurative language, we've kind of already alluded to that. It is more than the literal meaning. So a rose is an actual flower, right? A red rose is a real thing. It's a real item. If my sister, one of my sisters, she works for florists. If she brings up different roses or whatever, she's just doing something that's aesthetically pleasing, and because she cares. So she made homemade chicken soup while I was sick. She lives downstairs with my mom, and left it at the top of the stairs. And then she brought up some flowers. There's some leftover flowers but it was a gesture of love in general, and it was aesthetically put together. She's really good at it, right? That's what people pay florists for. So it carried more than just, well, here's some flowers, I picked randomly. It was, hey, I'm thinking about you. I care about you, right? Okay, let's move on to theme. Theme we've mentioned already. It's this idea, it's a message, it's the meaning that is the bigger picture about life. Okay, so when we say, how is literature like life, we're really thinking about, what's that theme? What are those ideas in there that are like life? When it's not just the rose, it's about a feeling. It's about, I'm communicating something that's bigger than just, I just grabbed this flower. It was growing in my yard here. I heard you like flowers. It's got something more to it, and they can be really the big issues of life. And so that's what we're looking for, right? Theme. Satire has a purpose. It's very narrowed down. It typically is in prose, but it can be in poetry. It's ridiculing, but with a cause. They didn't really qualify that. It's usually it's a type of social criticism. Let's add that to our, and that's heavy in our culture. There's a lot of satire. When they do, sometimes it's just for, sometimes it's just harsh. Sometimes it's just making fun. So there is a line where it's not being help me with the word. Not just a rant, not being bully. SNL skits, yeah, they're funny. Sometimes they're poking fun, just poking fun, Social criticism, yeah, it's not, and it's a little bit more specific than a roast, but y'all are right in the zone. Like, we just take pot shots and cut people down. It is, this is why I don't really like this particular definition. It is, the intention here is to point out a flaw in society that we might not see unless we kind of made fun. Or we kind of flipped it around. So in literature, it's usually pretty serious. Jonathan Swift, who wrote Gulliver's Travels, that's what he's mostly known for. That you can read that as a fairy tale, but it was really meant to be satire. The horse, he's the giant with the little people, and it wasn't just a fantasy. There's another episode with Gulliver, and he encounters these very intelligent beings that are like horses, and they're more intelligent than human beings. It was satire. It was more along the lines of Planet of the Apes stuff, where trying to point out flaws in humanity. And it's a little sharp. It's a little edgy. It's not usually funny. So yeah, we have satire, but in literature, it's a little bit more focused into trying to expose flaws by taking that sort of sideways view of it. Okay, last three, personification. That is a figurative language definition. So if you printed this out, I'd probably say use a highlighter to do the stuff that's in the same category, like figurative language, imagery, metaphor, symbol, simile, and personification. They're all grouped kind of together for figurative language. And you see those most heavily in poems, because they're more concise. than prose, but you can see still some of these in prose as well. Personification is we take an inanimate object. That means something's not alive. It could be your phone. It could be a computer mouse. It could be a bookcase. Anything that's non-animate, right? It's not living and breathing and growing, but we give it personal human qualities. So if we just say, this is my lifesaver, this is my best friend, or whatever like that, well, that's figurative because it's not literally a person. It just has some qualities that we associate with a companion or something like that. Okay, that's typical. So we look for that, and usually, after you get past this is for somewhere in there, I don't know what the magic age is 8. You start distinguishing between fantasy, fiction, and reality, right? That the tooth fairy isn't real. It's a bit of type of loss of innocence. But you are, to mature and grow, you do have to distinguish between what is fantasy and what is reality. And you recognize that that's not literal. That's not true. Your little teddy bear gives you comfort at night, but it's just made of fabric and stuffing and whatever, and it has sentimental importance and gives people comfort. So it's not to devalue it; it's just not animate, and you've given it that personification. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's part of human beings. We do that. I don't know that. No, some animals do that. You can, like, my dog likes little fake toys, right? And sometimes that they'll like little things and snuggle with them as well. So I guess some animals do that as well. All right, irony, they mentioned that in the video about what is literature, that's an aspect that's important. It implies there's a lot of depth to irony. There's different types. They're usually very basic. There's some contradiction of some kind. There's some expectation. When we say that's ironic, sometimes it's like, oh, that's a twist of fate. But cool how that turned out. We couldn't have planned it. It didn't come out the way I expected, but it sort of fits the situation. That's irony. So, and then the last that we look at is diction, and that's along with put the word syntax with that. It's the choice of words. It's the actual word choice. I'm going to use this word for this meaning, for this thing, rather than this one, because in the English language, even though we may be more limited than some other languages, like Greek, who has multiple words for love, we still have options. We can say affection. We can say, I dig you. We have all the, unfortunately, love is one of the ones we went a little bit short on, but so we have to use a lot of metaphors and similes to try to qualify that. But when we choose those words, a horse, there's all kinds of words there. There's specific ones to their gender, like stallion or mare or foal, to kind of help be more specific about that. There are words that are gallant, like steed, his royal steed. That's like really fancy horse. There's, they even have the word nag, that is not like nagging somebody, but it's not a nice word for it. It's like an ugly horse, it's old horse, ugly horse. So your choice of words for the same thing is very important because they convey specific meaning. All right, well, that's in there in your and here it's going to be on your quiz. Let's take a quick look at a poem that you can review, because I want to spend time explaining snow to you. This is a poem called Tell Me Something Good. And just as they did a highlight, I'm trying to make this as big as I can. And it's not working very well. Like, even I'm having a little bit of fun. Someone probably needs to mute that's not muted. We have an unknown guest. So for me to even know that you belong in here, I need you to type in and then mute, okay? Say, this is me, I'm the phone guest, but please mute, please mute. Okay. Thank you muchly. All right. So like I said, I'm trying to make this bigger and it is not working. So I'm going to go through it really quick. It is color coded. So what's in red is a metaphor. What's in orange is a simile. What is considered imagery is in yellow. We did not learn juxtaposition, so don't worry about that. They also highlighted important verbs and paradoxes. So here only the things that we had on that list, but just to get you an idea of how much can be packed into a poem, that because they use so much figurative language, it's really one of the characteristics of poetry typically is to heavily rely on that. You see this is written in 2-line stanzas, pretty much. You have 2 lines of space, even though the line carries over. Someone who is dead now told you, it is where you will learn to dance. Snow on your lips like a salted cut. You leap between your deaths. What a metaphor. Black as God's periods. Your arms cleaving little wounds in the wind. So this, that's would take definitely some study and looking up and some thought and some collaboration to understand, right? So some of it can be pretty dense, but we're going to move to our short story, Snow, not quite so dense, and what's called flash fiction. Like it is just this one page. Can you see that there? Yeah. All right, let's make it bigger. Let's get rid of the hamburger. Let's make it as big as possible. All right, this is the length of it, and yet it's going to have many qualities that we have already looked at. So Snow is in your discussion. Okay. Thank you. Your discussion assignment is about snow. So really, perk up here, and then sure, I may have to, my recording might run out because I forgot that I didn't do it as long as I should have. Okay, hopefully it'll keep going. All right, Snow by Julia Alvarez. Let me just give you a little tip. Normally, any information you can get about a piece of literature is very helpful, okay, to know who that is. Start with the title and the author, okay? I don't have time to type this in the thing, but start with who is this? If it doesn't tell you the year, at least you'll be able to narrow down for the time period that the person lived in. So you want to look that up. Sometimes they have certain types of things that they like to do, like Shakespeare. He wrote sonnets and plays. So, when you know that, then you can narrow that down. This is probably either a sonnet or a play, and that's pretty easy to distinguish. And then you can kind of look into that genre of sonnet, and you can help you unlock, what he's doing with the sonnets there. So we know this is a short story. Matter of fact, you can read this out loud very quickly. But Julia Alvarez, you'll see that she grew up and was born in the Dominican. I'm just going to give you the short version here. So you would look her up and find out she's still alive. She was, I'm trying to remember when she was born, maybe in the late 60s, something like that. I'm trying to do this from memory, but wrote a lot in the 1970s and 80s. And she was from the Dominican Republic, but then because of the coup down there at that time, her family escaped and went to New York City. And then later in adult life, when things were stable, she returned to visit. She's written other things. For a while, she was my favorite writer, and I was reading her novels, like In the Time of the Butterflies is a favorite. I'm trying to look if I have any on my bookshelf. I think I took them all to my house in my house library. Time of the Butterflies is a main one, and that's historical fiction. She wrote about these girls during that coup that lost their lives, and it's pretty remarkable. But she typically writes about Hispanic female characters. Ding, ding, ding. That helps. She's right there. And there's a certain time period. So those kinds of things will help. All right. Then you look at the title. Titles are a clue, y'all. I mean, they are not all sometimes they just name the protagonist, help you identify that. So, Shakespeare did that. Hamlet, Macbeth, Othello, Romeo and Juliet, we had the pair. That King Lear, pretty much it was about them. That's how you know, right? The title can be that, different clues. But if that's the word, right, you're going to look and see where does that word show up in, or that thing. If it's not a person, obviously the person is going to be the person. um, in the piece of literature. Okay, so that's a clue. That doesn't always mean it's the clue of the meaning, but it's there for a purpose, and they could call it anything they wanted. Don't not notice the title. I'm going to see if anybody wants to read a little bit. I am going to try to fly but you will probably want to reread it, but I'm going to ask you some questions along the way. So be ready. Be ready. We're looking for protagonist, antagonist, narrator. Okay. Setting is the thing you look for in a story. Where is this? When was it? Our first year in New York, we rented a small apartment with a Catholic school nearby, taught by the Sisters of Charity, hefty women in long black gowns and bonnets that made them look peculiar, like dolls in mourning. I liked them a lot, especially my grandmotherly fourth grade teacher, Sister Zoe. Zoe, you got the... All right, yes, setting is definitely New York, okay? And we'll be able to narrow that down to New York City. All right, it's our first year. Look at all the clues. And in a short story, everything's a clue, okay? Every sentence. There's a lot in that first sentence. There is figurative language. Did anybody see a simile? I'm going to kind of jump in and out of the literal and the figurative, which means something that's a description, a comparison. There's also visual imagery. Yes, thank you, Zoe. Like dolls in mourning. She was trying to describe how the nuns looked to a reader that maybe did not know. So in mourning, you're wearing, traditionally symbolic, that's wearing black. And she said they wore these long black gowns and bonnets, but they look like dolls. Okay. So that's a visual, long black gowns and bonnets. We can kind of picture that. Hefty is a word we can picture, what we can imagine, right? That's what imagery, think of imagery as imagine. Because of the words, I can imagine in my mind. And then that simile kind of clarifies that image. So there's a we. Let's go to the literal of the story. We rented a little apartment. There's this Catholic school nearby. And we get an I, like them a lot. So we don't know who I is yet, but there is a narrator telling you we and I, right? Telling the story. And focused in on, we have our first name character, Sister Zoe. So characters that get names are more important than the ones that don't have names. Okay, that's how that goes. You can't name everybody, you can't tell everybody's backstory, you can't tell everything about them. It's always going to be very focused. And again, the writer writes what they want you to know. I had a lovely name, she said, meaning Sister Zoe, and she had me teach the whole class how to pronounce it. And so here's the pronunciation. Yolanda. Yolanda. Okay. So if y'all have, some of y'all like, okay, I can think of some right here. You have a name that you ever went to school and you had to, you had to probably do with me, right? How do you pronounce your name? Did I pronounce that right? Right? My oldest daughter had one of those names. I thought everybody would know how to pronounce it. And instead of Leah, they would call her Leah. And, well, here's Yolanda, and she's having to share that pronunciation. Okay. So now we have our second character, and it's Yolanda. And Yolanda is the narrator, right? The person speaking. Now, is Yolanda and Julia the same? No. And I've had students who've missed that. It's on the same page, everything, and go, this is autobiographical. Here's the thing about fiction. Writers do write from their own experiences, but they put it together in an imaginative way. So Julia is not Yolanda, but she does know what it's like to be an immigrant, to come to a Hispanic immigrant and come to New York City and be to a different culture, right? So she can draw on that. Doesn't mean she lived this story, but she has enough to draw from it. I wouldn't know that experience. I do know what it's like to be new, right? Some of you have written about that, have changed schools a lot, grew up. Some of you have lived in the same place. Everybody has different stories. I didn't grow up in the same place, go to the same schools. I was always the new student, it's like every few years. And so that was just my experience. Okay. But I could write from that, but I can't write from being from a different culture, geographically, right? Or a different language. As the only immigrant in my class. Now, wow, New York City, they're full of immigrants. And that's so weird because that was the place where immigrants first came historically to Ellis Island. They came from Europe. They were processed there at Ellis Island over there by, you go, anybody been there in New York City? You know, they had the little Ellis Island. That's come bring me your poor, your whatever, here you come. And so it's always been a place to have the immigrants came. They came over in ships. They came from all these different places. That was especially early 1900s, okay? But it went back further than that, even the 1700s. So to be the only immigrant in her class, wow. I was put in a special seat in the first row by the window, apart from the other children. Why? So that Sister Zoe could tutor me without disturbing them. Slowly, she enunciated the new words I was to repeat. Laundromat, cornflakes, subway, snow. Okay, anything stick out to you there? I've been showing you some things that you should pay attention to. Now your turn. Anything stick out in those? Because we infer, yes, the word snow. Mm-hmm. We infer things, and then some of it's just laying there for us to pay attention to. What do you see that rhymes, Maya? We don't typically think of rhyme being part of prose. So this is prose, not a poem. But it doesn't mean something couldn't be. Ending sounds. Okay. All right. We'll put the two that go together there. All right. The visuals, the imagery. She's by the window in the first row. We can picture that. If she's having to enunciate words here and she's the only immigrant, what does that tell us about what kind of language she's coming into this classroom with? And yes, snow is key and where it's, but let's not talk about that. That's what we can infer, like we're paying attention, and we should. Okay, but she's having to learn the word laundromat. Let's put some things together. This is the logical, critical thinking, putting two and two. It's like being a detective. And that's kind of what you have to do, is be a detective with literature. To be able to find those deeper meanings, you really do. Okay, so you look and find what's on the surface because they're the clues. So she's got a name, Yolanda. She's the only immigrant. She is tutored by Sister Zoe, and she's learning these new words, right? New words: laundromat, cornflakes, subway, snow. What do you think is her first language? You think English is her first language? Okay, so maybe she has some basic English, but if, like Julia Alvarez, and she has a name that could have Hispanic origins, right? Especially going back to at least some time period before now, that when there's fewer immigrants. Yes, it's probably her second language. And if she is in, what grade is she in? She's in fourth grade. Okay, she did tell us that my grandmotherly fourth grade teacher, Sister Zoe. So probably Spanish. She's learning, she's functional enough. This is before No Child Left Behind. This is before all these little things. We're going to get a more specific date. But when you can put a couple things together, oh, that's different from New York today, right? She wouldn't be, put over in the side like that. I mean, they look at sometimes today, contemporary practices go, though, they shouldn't have done that. They are making her, what's the word? Make her stick out and not feel like she's part of the group or whatever, right? That could happen. But Sister Zoe did it in a way that sounds like she didn't feel isolated, but I'm sure she already felt that way. Now look at the four words: laundromat, cornflakes, subway, snow. Is there any particular order that it had to be in? Like, do these have, could you put it in maybe alphabetical order? Yeah, ostracized is a good word for that. Could you say cornflakes, subway, snow, and laundromat? Those would still be the same new words, right? Why do you think it wouldn't flow as well? Why do you think that? Because it's always intentional. I want you to always be asking why. Be the detective. Why? What is that telling me? What do they want me to know? What are the clues? And then why did they do it that way? Because they could do it any way they wanted to. Do you know that first and last things are really important in our culture? And when you break up a paragraph, right, and I teach this in composition, that first sentence in a body paragraph is your topic sentence, and that's where you state that most important idea that you're trying to get across in the rest of your paragraph. In your introduction, you put, the first thing you do is to engage somebody, and then the last thing is that thesis statement, and it's to say, this is basically the main idea of this whole rest of the essay that I'm going to develop in detail. First and last is really important in our culture. So if you put whatever word you want to see last, you have a choice here. So is laundromat the most important word if we see it there, or cornflakes? So what makes snow maybe more important? Yeah, it could be, but we have a clue. If without this clue, we wouldn't not have yet an idea, but we've already had, yes, Amber, the title, because the title is snow. That is why we go, oh, whoa, this is our first mention of snow. And Julia Alvarez put it right on the tail end where it sort of is more obvious. It's not tucked in and embedded. It's right there, snow. Okay. Now we may not see it again, but we're looking, it should jump off the page. Anything that's in the title, ooh, we should be put our little, I need to see snow. Where's snow in this, right? And that's kind of help you there. All right. So that narrows it down. Without that, we could just randomly go, this is a random list. Does it have any special meaning? And the only way we know is if there's a repetition. And that's another thing, is repetition is a key, all right, to understanding. When it's there once, okay, maybe it's just what it is. But if it's repeated, ding, 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 that's a clue. All right. That is, pay attention. Okay. All right. She validates this inference that we've got so far about, her English language ability, because, I got some little bit more. There we go. Hopefully that helps. Soon I pick up enough English to understand Holocaust was in the air. All right. So the rest of this paragraph, using my composition teacher hat, is that it's all about this concept of Holocaust. Now, notice that it's Holocaust with a lowercase h. And let's go back to our video. You have literature with a capital L and literature with not a capital L. We have war, the word war, no capital letter, just it could be any war, right? But if you have the name of a specific war, that's going to be capitalized. Like the Vietnam War. World War I. Okay, so this is not Holocaust with a lower case letter is not the Holocaust. Okay, with the capital H. So if we say the Holocaust, capital L, what are we referring to? That's why we got to know some history. Like, if we don't know about our history, if we don't know our literature, we really don't know much about life, because there's so many things that made what we're at what it is, and we don't have that understanding. So they all work together. That's why we make sure you get that in before you finish up college, because you really won't have another opportunity unless you go and really proactively read, on your own, to self-educate. Now, what is the Holocaust? Okay, thank you. There we go. The Jewish genocide by Nazis in, I don't know, I can't remember the official date it started, but we know that it was in the 1930s because it preceded World War II with Hitler in particular. And so there's been, it was National Holocaust Day just, I want to say a couple of weeks ago, maybe. Yeah, so an event of mass death, that would be the lowercase, any Holocaust, right? Like any massacre, anything. Oh, it was just a week ago. Thank you, Erica. So if it says Holocaust was in the air, okay, we're trying to find other setting clues. She didn't say the Holocaust, capital H. So it's not the one from the Jewish Holocaust. Yeah. Just like even the word genocide. Okay. All right. So there's something, an event of mass death is more what she's talking about here. So Sister Zoe explained to a wide-eyed classroom. All right, fourth graders, right? You got to know something about your world, especially if there's real danger. Okay. What was happening in Cuba? Now we have something to narrow this down. Cuba. And the next two words, Russian missiles were being assembled, trained or focused or aimed supposedly on New York City. And then we've got like bing, 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 these little clues right together. President Kennedy, looking worried too, was on the television at home explaining we might have to go to war against the communists. Now we know what the fear, the tragedy in the air, the event, possible event of mass death. Someone Google this real. Cuban Missile Crisis and President Kennedy. I'm giving you the terms, but and then see what year you can narrow down from those historical clues. Be the detective. Cuban Missile Crisis, President Kennedy. Give you a second to do that. Bing, ding, ding. Very good, Najiba. Anybody else find that? Hopefully a couple of you. Yep. Okay, that narrowed it. Wait, look, Erica's got dates even. Okay. So Kennedy wasn't even the president for very long. And then you take because of his assassination, right, in 1963. So, and then you take the Cuban Missile Crisis. I didn't really put that together until I was, reading this, until I was doing some research for my parents' 50th wedding anniversary, which was several years ago, because they were married in 1962. So I was doing research for their 50th wedding anniversary, and all these things were happening. I was like, oh gosh, it was a scary time. The Cuban Missile Crisis, a year later, they didn't know this, but Kennedy would be JFK would be assassinated. Only like the second, I think, president to be assassinated, because you have Lincoln. So now we have a specific time. We have a specific place. It is New York City. They're worried because there's a nuclear bomb threat. Okay. Cuban missiles, we're going to be taking you out. All right. And even as late as the 1970s, late 1970s, the big world problem when I was in school then was nuclear war. There was no such thing that we knew about terrorists. That was not a thing. It still is. We worry about that, especially September 11th, 2001, which is before some of you were born. When I was first teaching college, students still could remember where they were and what was happening when that happened, like in the 2005, 2006. They could remember, and then at a certain point, like, no, I wasn't born yet. Oops, well, okay. But you've heard about it. Hopefully you studied it. That changed. Like COVID changed the way we do things and think about life. 9/11 did. We didn't fear terrorists before. Okay, some of you remember or older. And, the Kennedy's assassination did that for the generation of my parents. But this threat of nuclear war. So that's what we were worried. We didn't know if we would live to be adults and be married, because everybody was threatening nuclear war. It was scary. There was no de-escalation, and of course, it's still a threat. We're still concerned about it, but not the way we did. So this is new. This is a new concern. Now, we might have to go to war against the communists. The communists aren't just in Cuba. That's just our closest country in proximity that was communist, and it was us versus them. So we have an antagonist already, right? The antagonist is not just Yolanda's, it's the Americans that have this antagonist, and it's the communists. The communist threat of nuclear war, okay? And that's going to set that stage for the conflict in here, okay? So it gets to that pretty quick, and everything is nice. They've moved to New York. She has a really nice teacher, Sister Zoe. She's nice things about her. She's tutoring her, but then she has to tell the whole class there's something really bad. At school, we had air raid drills. Y'all, in the South, we have what? Tornado drills, right? We had tornado drills. I didn't grow up with tornado drills. I grew up in North Carolina and around Pennsylvania, and we just didn't have those. But when I came to Alabama, I learned all about, tornadoes are a real thing, a real scary thing and a real thing. And you got to have tornado drills. Well, they had air raid drills. And it says an ominous bell would go off and we'd file into the hall, fall to the floor, cover our heads with our coats, and imagine our hair falling out, the bones in our arms going soft. Okay, well, it's one of those things that maybe makes you feel better, but that's not going to save you from a nuclear bomb. At home, Mammy and my sisters and I said a rosary for world peace. I heard new vocabulary. I'm going to read real quick. Yeah, it's scary, so we can get done in time. Nuclear bomb, radioactive fallout, bomb shelter. Great. Sister Zoe explained how it would happen. She drew a picture. Remember, this is a fourth grader who also has a limited understanding of English, and so this visual is very powerful. I drew a picture of a mushroom on the blackboard and dotted a flurry of chalk marks for the dusty fallout that would kill us all. So maybe you've seen those pictures of the flume, pictures of a nuclear bomb going off, and it kind of has that flume and looks like a mushroom. So that's the visual image that's unique there. Moving on, because I'm going to try to finish this. The months grew cold, November, December. It was dark when I got up in the morning. Still is here too, right? Frosty when I followed my breath to school. One morning as I sat at my desk, daydreaming out the window, remember she's over at the window, I saw dots in the air like the ones Sister Zoe had drawn. Random at first, then lots and lots. I shrieked. This is like the climactic point because bomb! Bomb! Sister Zoe jerked around, her full black skirt ballooning, which is a figurative language, as she hurried to my side. A few girls began to cry, but then Sister Zoe's shock looked faded. I mean, because this could happen, right? It could have been a bomb. Hey, Yolanda, dear, that's snow. She laughed. Snow. And Yolanda, snow, I repeated. I looked out the window warily, which means kind of like, I don't know. All my life, I'd heard about the white crystals that fell out of American skies in the winter. Maybe that's been yours with the snow we had. Maybe you don't remember snow. Maybe the first time you're like, I heard about snow, I've seen pictures of snow, but I've never, been out in the snow. I heard about it. From my desk, I watched the fine powder dust, the sidewalk, and parked cars below. Now, this is supposed to be quotation marks. Okay, so here's this story. I'm going to stop. There's one more sentence, but it really sticks out. And one of the things that helps stick it out is it's the very last sentence in the story. We have the story, poor little, Yolanda. She mistook snow for the bomb. Bless her heart. We could already have some, I understand that. I've misunderstood things. We can make a human connection. We don't have to have gone through what she did. We didn't have to live during the Cuban air missile. Right? We didn't have to think that snow was a bomb to understand that human reaction of things that are unknown that can be frightening. We can connect. We can realize that Julia Alvarez, just stop it right there, is writing about a very human experience that we can have our own relationship to. And one of the questions in the discussion is, how is this like life? And I'm helping prep you for that. Because we can all experience things that are unknown, that are scary. Because we don't know. But that's not the only message here. And because it's, again, uses a reference to snow, that's our ding, ding, ding clue that this is an important thing not to miss. Each snowflake was different, Sister Zoe said. Like a person. Irreplaceable. I know I haven't activated Zoe. I didn't know anybody doing it yet. And beautiful. I'm going to read that again. It's beautiful. Each snowflake was different, Sister Zoe said, like a person. Irreplaceable and beautiful. She probably felt pretty, maybe dumb, right? She wasn't, but she probably felt everybody thinks I'm dumb, stupid, because I don't know what snow is, right? She felt humiliated. That's probably the best word. Probably felt humiliated. And Sister Zoe turns this around and says something very important. And it's not just about her. It's not each snowflake is like you. It's like a person. So you see how it takes on a whole nother universe? This is about everybody. Everybody has value. Everybody is unique and irreplaceable. Everybody has beauty. Wow. Now that is a powerful meaning, right? Not to miss. Wow. Okay. So if Julia, there's these layers of things that you could maybe relate to. If you have been a person that English is not your second language, you could totally immediately relate to Yolanda. If you've ever been the new student at school and everybody knows stuff and you don't, and even coming to colleges like that the first time, you're like a fish out of water. This isn't high school anymore, and all your buddies aren't there, and this is new, and they're asking different things of you and expecting different, or it's the first time in a long time and you haven't done this kind of virtual class. All that way of feeling kind of out of place and uncomfortable, and do I fit in, and the opportunity for misunderstanding things is so great, right? There's already those layers, but then there's this beautiful thing right at the end that's for everybody, no matter what their experiences have been. And that's the beauty of literature. Even a little story like this, okay, just incredible. So I hope you got that. I hope you enjoyed that. That is what your discussion is about. And I am just got enough time to kind of jump into that and show you that. Of course, the quiz is going to be over like mostly the terms and some of the things in the hang on a second. I'm almost there. Okay. And then let me go to that and we'll be bingo out of here. All right. Yeah, some of these are pretty dense and I'm trying to do, while you didn't have time to do the assignment, I'm trying to get everything you need to be able to do the assignment and know what you're doing with that if you were in class and engaged. Okay. So to the questions. All right. Remember to use standard English, do the check. You must reference 2 quotes from the textbook, that PDF, or videos, and be supported with an example from the piece of literature. But I'm saying, let's use the short story. Okay. But you might do something else as far as whatever. Anyway, but you should be using the story. How is the story Snow like life? Give an example. Are there universal themes in the story Snow that are interest and concern to other or all cultures? Give an example and explain, right? The more explaining you do, the better your grade. 3, remember you're choosing 2, not all 5, and just number. Done 1 and 2 or whatever, 1 and 3, 2 and 4, whatever. What are the characteristics or elements that cause, based on that videos we watch, this is more video based or PDF, that cause a piece of literature to endure? Do you think a story like Snow will endure? Why or why not? Okay. How can we use literature to explain or clarify our own ideas about the world? What does the story Snow help us understand about others if we've never experienced exactly the same identical circumstances? And then make sure you relate this to something specific in the instructional materials or to Snow. How does this assignment develop your critical thinking, collaboration, communication, and or creative skills? Okay, so you're choosing 2. And again, you post and then you reply. Now you want to post as soon as possible and then reply by the end of the week. That's how you get the most points. If you do everything on Sunday night, you get a good grade, but you won't get the max points. Max points come when you post early so that many people have a chance to read and engage and everybody doesn't have to wait till the end of the week because there's nothing there. So I always give the max points to the students that post early and then come back in a little bit later and engage in the replies. All right, that's it for today. Thank you so much for your engagement. I hope that you got that this helped you at a whole nother level in many different ways to know how to understand literature, get something interesting out of it. And as always, the more you engage, the more you do get out of it, right? The more you participate, ask questions, and so forth. And so Have a great rest of the day, and I will see you back here Wednesday at 10 o'clock.